guess just to get started, can you tell us a little bit about what prompted the creation of Let's Build Homes and kind of what the mission of of the organization is all about?
Yeah, great. Well, I left office. I was mayor of Burlington for 12 years. I left office almost about a year ago in April of 2024. And pretty quickly, I got invited into a conversation that was going on by a number of major employers looking for a way to um, address what, there's it's just become really clear to many leaders in Vermont is just that our lack of homes, our shortage of homes is driving so many of our social and economic problems. And this group was meeting regularly and trying to figure out what to do about it. I was very interested in the conversation. As you know, I basically my entire 30 plus year career has been in housing in one way or another. I was an affordable housing developer before I was the mayor of Burlington. And then as mayor, housing was one of my top initiatives. We had three different housing action plans during my time in office. We were very focused on increasing the number of homes that were being built. And we did that. We had a fourfold increase in the rate of new homes being created over the course of those 12 years. So and yet, despite that progress, it was, really clear here in Burlington and looking out more broadly across the state, there was a lot more work to do. So I was excited to join this group and quickly focused us on where I thought we could have the biggest kind of collective impact. And that was through the creation of a new coalition to advocate at the state, regional, and local level on housing issues. My I took us in this direction because I saw looking out around the country, a lot of precedent for this type of organization. There are 7 or 8 other states now, including all of our neighbors, that have pro-housing, really housing abundance organizations like this that are having an impact on policy. It just was really clear to me that we needed that here in this state as well. Honestly, I've been thinking we needed something like this going all the way back to when I was in graduate school back in the 1990s and studied then the differences between what Vermont was doing with land use regulation versus what I always thought a kind of comparable state, the state of Oregon, was doing. If you're interested in just a second more on this, in Oregon, back in the 70s, both states passed these very ambitious statewide land use regulations. Vermont passed Act 250, which was maybe, you talk to people who were around back then, engaged, and there was supposed to be kind of a planning effort that accompanied it that was going to create some difference between the way Act 250 was applied in different parts of the state, but that never really happened. And so Act 250 has basically been this overlay over the entire state that has been really a check on new homes being created statewide. Oregon did something very different. They created urban growth boundaries. The governor in the 70s said, this legislation said every municipality should look out 20 years for the growth they want to have from the center of their city and draw lines on a map. And inside these lines, growth is going to be encouraged. Outside it, it's going to be it's going to be restricted. And that land use regime is still around now, 50 years later. There's been a group called 1,000 Friends of Oregon, which has been an advocacy group that has been very associated with that legislation since the start and is still around. And it really has been a political coalition of businesses, environmentalists, and old people, younger people, active transportation folks, and it's been effective at getting a lot more housing built there in Oregon than we've seen here in Vermont. So it's been exciting to be involved in something that I thought we needed for a long time and to get it off the ground. We launched a couple months ago and it's off to a very strong start.
So there's been tons of commentary about the housing shortage that we have currently in Vermont, and I'm sure there's a lot of factors that cause that to happen. And if we have time later, I'd love to explore that with you. But I guess I'm just curious to hear what you think are the solutions.
Mhm.
What should we do now at this point that would be the most effective way to eliminate the housing shortage that we have in the state? Is it building new homes? Is it rehabbing older homes that are not the right fit for people anymore? Or what's your sense as to the best way to go?
So, I appreciate the way you asked the question. It doesn't always get asked this way. How do we solve this housing shortage? It is a shortage of homes. We need more homes. I do think that both of the strategies, kind of big picture strategies laid out there, are important here. Um, we Clearly, we're not going to get to our goals without a substantial number of new homes being built. We're building new permanent homes at about 1/3 the growth rate that we were doing back in the 1980s. And that um, uh, slowdown in the creation of new homes is what's driving the shortage. The Vermont Housing Finance Agency put a number on this last summer. They said in a needs assessment, well-researched document, that we needed to create 30,000 homes over the next 5 years, which means more than doubling our current rate of housing production for most of the last 15 years. I do think that a significant percentage of those homes could come through better um, use of our existing structures, our existing buildings. There's some really interesting stats out there that show that Vermont, while being dramatically underhoused, having one of the highest homeless rates in the country for several years in a row now. Uh, by some metrics, it is overhoused in the sense that the amount of space that we have per household size can be very large. You have a lot of older structures built in prior generations for larger families, larger number of individuals, and now have very few people living in them. Burlington has many examples of this, and yet we make it very hard to convert these old, larger structures from one unit, from single family homes to multifamily units. That is definitely one strategy we should be pursuing, is to better utilize those existing structures.
So how big of I'm not sure what the right word is here, obstacle or roadblock or whatever, is the whole zoning piece? I mean, there's been a couple of the legislature in the last couple of years has enacted a few new statutes that seem to try to, make it easier for developers to build homes in downtown centers. Um, but I've often wondered. I mean, I've spoken to developers who say, "Gosh, the zoning thing, it's like such a pain in the neck, And then Act 250 is another thing that comes up a lot. Are those really big obstacles, or is it just sort of well-intentioned, ordinances and legislation that just is no longer applicable today, compared to where it might have been back when they were first enacted?
So, um, in some, the accumulation of various restrictions on building at the state and local level that have accumulated rule after rule, policy after policy for decades, I believe, as someone who has built homes as a developer and and tried to support developers in building them uh, as mayor, the cumulative weight of all of these uh, many cases well-intended regulations and sometimes explicitly exclusionary regulations, the cumulative weight of that is enormous and has an enormous impact on our ability to create new homes and to do so at an affordable rate. And there are many examples of that, and this is a long-term work, because this is a problem that we have created, as I say, over decades, and there are so many areas that are you're right, there has been in the last couple of years finally an effort to reverse some of that, and these steps that the legislature took the last couple of years were good steps in the right direction, but they are only the beginning of the work that is really going to be necessary if we want to align our policies, our land use policies, with the type of community that I believe Vermonters want to see. If we want to have a place of housing abundance, if we want to be a place where our children can afford to live here, if we want to be a place where people who want to age in the community that they've lived in their whole lives, but want to downsize. If we want to make it possible for them to the homes to be available to do that kind of thing, if we're going to have housing option of all shapes and sizes, there's a lot of work to do, and it's really, it is hard to discuss because of the total amount of that work. But to give you a couple examples of the work still to be done, you know, and I think it's important for people to understand this, because I think as you say, I think a lot of people are like, oh, there's been these big housing bills the last couple of years. Haven't we solved this? Well, no, we haven't come anywhere close to solving this. The main thing the legislation, the Act 250 reform did last year was to say we're going to start a process of drawing maps for the entire state of Vermont that is going to put every acre of the state into one of three tiers: tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Tier 1 is tier 1 projects. Tier 1 land is going to have a green light for future development, and that projects in tier 1 areas is going to be exempt from Act 250. Will not have to go through the large expense and time and uncertainty required in going through the Act 250 process. So that's going to be a big deal, how that map is drawn. No one knows today exactly how that's going to be drawn. And every time we've gone through a map making process like this in recent decades of creating designated areas to encourage development, the area that we've encouraged it in has been very, very small. If that's what happens as a result of this process, we are going to be closing off for decades to come the opportunity for the housing development we need. So one of the things Let's Build Homes is started doing, is to work on those maps. It's a hard thing to do because, and this I think speaks to why this is a challenging task. Just here's how the map's going to get drawn. The process is starting with the 11 different regional planning commissions. All of the state is carved up into these different regions. The regional planning commissions are going to start the process of drawing that map. If they want to put parts of the state the part of their region is in a tier 1 area, they are going to need the locality to opt into that right now as well. Governor Scott wants to change that. He suggested it should be an opt-out. Maybe the legislature will take further action on that this year. But you have regional government holding the pen, local government holding the pen, and then ultimately there's this brand new land use review board that has just been created by that Act 250 legislation that is there ultimately, I believe, going to sign off on the map and send it to the legislature. And there may even be a further legislative vote. I'm not even completely sure on that. So you've got 3 or 4 levels of government decision making, all of which I believe is likely to end up with a very restrictive anti-housing map if we don't have a group like Let's Build Homes engaging that and trying to bring a pro-housing perspective. What's at stake here? I mean, just to give you these numbers, I think are a little bit interesting. Before the Act 250 reform last spring, approximately 0.4% of the state was in a designated area, an area within one of these maps where we've encouraged development around the state. 0.4% of the total land area of the state. The legislation increased that with these temporary exemption areas to about 2% of the state. I'm thinking, looking downfield for the decades to come, the pressures that we're under, we're an appealing place. People want to live here. We're going to need a lot more than 2% of the state to be where people can build homes if we're going to be a community, be a society that thrives. If we're going to be a place that people can afford to live in without being, enormously wealthy or getting enormous support from the government to live here. So I think there's a lot of stake in these maps, and that's that's kind of a statutory imperative for why we need this group right now, because this is a statutory window when these debates are going to be happening, and no one is engaging these from a pro-housing perspective comprehensively if we don't do it.
How do you think we sort of work through the whole NIMBY factor and some of these developments that come up so often? I'm thinking here in Manchester, every time a proposal comes up, it's like the refrain is always, oh yeah, we need affordable housing, but this is the wrong place to build it. Got to build it someplace where I don't have to look at it. I mean, how do we break through that?
Yeah, I've got several answers to that, Andrew, and I think kind of, again, Let's Build Homes, the purpose of us being is right at the center of it. I mean, first of all, we uh, we need to redesign the systems with which we approve housing to move forward so that it is not so subject to the NIMBYist obstruction that our system is today. I mean, it is just ridiculous the way our current system works. And I've lived this directly. I had one project that I worked on. It was like exactly the kind of project Burlington has long said it wanted. It was an old, underutilized warehouse that we wanted to repurpose as 25 apartments over a cafe and covered parking. And essentially one neighbor didn't like it and opposed it every step of the way, despite the fact that it was consistent with the zoning laws, despite the fact that it was clearly consistent with Act 250 guidelines. And this one neighbor was able, with some other people being involved, but it was really led by one person, was able to hold the project up for 5 years. And that is not an uncommon story. Our system almost encourages that kind of thing because it is, the system gives great authority to someone that slows down the process, and that can be used to, it can be used to attempt to obstruct and kill a project entirely, and it often succeeds at that. Or sometimes it's used to, extort things essentially out of developers for the personal benefit or sometimes the community benefit in the area. And we just should not have a system that gives one individual or so few individuals the ability to veto the will of the whole community, the will of policymakers. And we've got to, some people have described our current system as a vetocracy, and that's a real problem. And we could change that. And the way you change that is to, I think, push us towards a system where public debate and discussion is very important. It happens up front at the policy setting level. That is where we should have a big community debate about what kind of community we want to look like, what kind of building and structures we want and uses we want to have in different areas of town. Once that policy has been set through a legitimate democratic process that has public engagement and input, we then that should be, like we have in other areas of our law, that should be the law of the land. And you shouldn't be able to then relitigate what the policy should be every time a specific project comes forward. This is being done increasingly around the country. The city of Hartford, as I understand it, so Hartford, Connecticut, if you have a housing proposal, it gets permitted administratively. There is no public hearing. There is no public action that can be appealed through the courts for years and years. That's the kind of system I think we need to move towards, is one where the public engagement is at the policy and rulemaking setting, and then builders and local governments are able to implement what that policy says.
So
So that's one answer to it, is you actually change the setting. But more broadly, and I think this is important, really, we're not going to get systems like that. We are not going to get the other kinds of reforms and changes that we've been talking about already and that are needed if there is not a sea change in the way that Vermonters and Americans think about this challenge. And what I have seen, what I saw as the mayor of Burlington is if you have these discussions with young people involved, with people who will benefit from policies that lead to more housing options and opportunities, having the many people and interests that benefit from housing abundance at the table when these policies are being set. What I saw as a mayor of Burlington is that completely changes the conversation. You don't only have the folks, the NIMBYs, as you're saying, coming out. You have a much broader, more balanced conversation, and you end up with many more pro-housing decisions. And that's what Let's Build Homes is in part trying to do as well. We are building this statewide coalition of what is currently about 700 Vermonters. I hope we grow it in the coming months to many thousands of Vermonters. And it is a coalition of folks that I hope, and we are going to try to work with them to show up when these decisions are being made, and that you are going to have not just the obstructionist or concerned voices at the table, that you are going to have a much broader discussion when these decisions are being made in the future than at times you have in the past.
I mean, one of the big issues around housing, of course, is the cost of it. And I was very interested to read a recent article in 7 Days where you talk about the TIF districts, tax increment financing.
Yes.
I wonder, do you see this as a key to kind of helping to make these projects affordable for people? Because at $500 a square foot or whatever it is, the current number is, I mean, that prices it out of, the normal person's income very quickly.
Yeah, no, this is a very important issue, and that's why we've chosen it as our first real big kind of legislative effort. I mean, here's how I see it, Andrew, is like, there has been a change in the public thinking about housing, and there is greater consensus, as those two big bills in the legislature suggest. There is much more of a consensus that we need to build more homes right now than there has been at any point in recent decades. Unfortunately, that new consensus has happened just at a point where economically it is harder to build homes than it has been in a long time, because interest rates are at a historically high level. The cost of interest, almost all new housing or new real estate construction in general gets built with a lot of debt. So an increase in interest rates can have a really dramatic impact on the economic viability of a project. And in addition, since the pandemic, we've seen the cost of construction rise dramatically in Vermont, in large part because of workforce and supply chain issues. And what's happening with President Trump and tariffs right now
Yeah.
threatens to make that even
So
considerably
Canadian lumber costs are going to
worse.
go skyrocketing.
So those are two big strikes against us right now. A third major strike that is imposed on many projects in Vermont is the high cost of public infrastructure. In my experience, again, both as a builder and from the mayor's seat, almost every time a significant project came forward that was going to offer a major increase in the number of homes, that requires a lot of public infrastructure to get built to support those new homes. Even in Burlington, where we have arguably the most robust public infrastructure of anywhere in the state. And there are many parts of the state where there's very little public infrastructure, and to build anything requires an upgrade or a sewer extension or, road or sidewalk construction. And these are public costs. These are public assets that the public entities will own and be responsible for, and that create new public value and economic value for municipalities. And it's appropriate for the public sector to pay for them. However, that is not the way it works generally in Vermont at this point. This is different than how it used to be for kind of interesting reasons that we could get into. But generally, the strategy in Vermont to get these infrastructure upgrades is to add that as a project cost, is to require those sometimes millions of dollars to be paid by the people who are living in the new development. And, that may sort of sound fair, and you can understand why there's a reluctance to put new costs on existing taxpayers and entities. And there's a way to do that through, as you refer, this tax increment financing, or when a new project is built, it creates very substantial new public revenues that flow to the municipality and the state. New property tax revenue specifically, other types of revenues as well, but I'm specifically talking about property tax revenue. If you allow the project and the municipality to capture those new revenues for a limited period of time and use those public revenues to pay for these public assets, the projects can pay for themselves. And once this infrastructure is paid off, the debt to build this infrastructure is paid off, then you have, kind of a windfall of new revenues flowing to the public entities. This type of infrastructure financing is the norm when you look around the country. 49 states have tax increment financing like this. Vermont, as we understand it, talking to experts, talking to people who work in multiple states, we are nearly unique in how difficult we make it and complicated we make it to try to do that type of financing. We do allow, in some very limited circumstances, tax increment financing, but only 7 municipalities in the whole state have figured out ever how to do it. And the way the legislation works, you have to just jump through an enormous number of hoops to make it possible. What we are proposing is to make it a much simpler, more straightforward tool, one that could be used by large communities and small ones, and that would address one of these three major cost factors. This will not do anything about the high interest rates or the high cost of construction. It will take this third area, public infrastructure costs, and create, something that will be a real solution to that many times.
Okay. I have like about 5 minutes or so left on this call, and then there's like about 5,000 questions I'd love to ask you. But I guess I'm just wondering, do you folks anticipate doing any kind of housing work down here in Bennington County or this part of the state, or is that a
Yes. The
down the
answer,
road?
the answer to that, Andrew, and I'll try to be less long-winded than my other answers. The answer is yes, absolutely. Our ambition, our goal is to be a statewide coalition. We already have members from all 14 counties, and we intend to be active throughout the state. Again, we want to be, when you say when we're going to do housing work, we see our role, the role of Let's Build Homes is to be an advocate for pro-housing policies and decisions at the state level, regional level, and local level, and maybe the project level as well. And yes, we intend to create the capacity to do that statewide. We're ramping up to that. We're kind of building the airplane as we take off here. Right now we have a 1.5-time staffer. I'm doing this currently as a volunteer. We have a lobbyist, but we are in the process of raising funds and building that out. And I'm optimistic we're going to be a force statewide in the months and years to come.
I'm going to be doing a phone call tomorrow with someone from Brushwood Homes. I don't know if you've heard of them or know of them. They saw a story I wrote a month ago about Janet Hurley's arrival at the Land Use Bureau, and he got in contact with me. I kind of not sure, why to register, but he wants to do a call about their homes they do, these modular homes. Do you see that as part of the solution?
I don't know Brushwood specifically. I do think the potential of modular homes to really positively impact this issue is enormous, and it's sort of an exciting time in that discussion. This is not a new discussion. People have been talking about factory build modular homes being a cost saver for a long time, but this is yet another area, and something I haven't quite said, Andrew, is the ways in which governmental decisions have limited our ability to build homes quickly and affordably is not limited just to the kind of land use and planning areas that we've been talking about. There are other restrictions that make it that the way in which we regulate construction can make offsite construction very difficult to do. Sometimes this has come as a result of union pressures and not so much in Vermont, but I think in other parts of the city, it can be very difficult to build anything offsite because of the way in which those issues have been sort of fought out in the public square. There are public health regulations that in Vermont, I think we need to really rethink. I mean, the same regulation, we regulate contaminants in the soils to an order of magnitude more restrictively than neighboring states do. And it's that kind of regulation that resulted in us losing our high school here in Burlington, and that absolutely adds cost to every new home being built, or many of the new homes being built, often without, I think, creating any additional public health. I think we got to think about whether our statewide property tax, the way it's been set up, limits the ability of homes to get done or has negative impact. So it there's a lot of work to do to think through how do we actually get to a place where we're encouraging new homes to get built.
Do you think there's a role the federal government could play in helping move this all along? I'm sure they are doing a lot of things, or at least were doing. We're going to find out, I guess, in the next few months as to whether or not that will continue or not once Elon Musk gets finished, whatever it is he's trying to do. But I mean, would there be a constructive role that the federal government could play that would, sort of be in sync with, local control and state,
Yeah.
control of things?
So again, the answer is clearly yes. The federal government could do a lot more than they're doing now. It is interesting. Certainly, over the last 15 years, there has been a growing interest in the federal government in engaging this area, which has traditionally been seen to be really a province of state and local government. President Obama talked about when he was president, he talked about the problem that there was restrictive exclusionary zoning, the problems with that. He did create some federal funding for planning tools that, honestly had an impact in Burlington. The federal government paid for us to do a great downtown planning effort that did result in many regulatory changes in the downtown. That is a big part of the reason why we were able to increase our housing production 400% over the time I was in office. So there has been some limited involvement in the past. I was at the Democratic convention this past summer, and it was exciting to see both Obama and Vice President Kamala Harris explicitly talk about this being a national issue, the lack of housing. I mean, it is a national issue. The estimates are that we are actually dramatically impacting the gross domestic product of the whole country right now because of how restrictive our housing policies have been, how difficult. America has always been historically a place where people could move to opportunity and did when different parts of the country were experiencing some kind of economic bust, people could move to where there were booms going on. That was part of our economic strength. That doesn't happen now, and there's a lot of evidence out there that it has just gotten very, very hard for people to move to where the opportunities are. And ironically, their housing opportunities are least in the areas in the parts of the country that are most economically productive. So this is a national issue. Clearly, if there had been a Harris administration, she was going to do something about it. The Trump administration has made a little bit of noise about doing something here. It will be, we haven't seen anything yet. And, fundamentally, yes. Could the federal government, the federal government is obviously an extraordinarily powerful force. And if they wanted to impact this issue positively, they could. I fear that we're headed in the opposite direction with this new tariff regimes. Could actually make things much more expensive, harder in the short term.